Good morning, and I am here back once again in Peel Park in Kirkintilloch because just there is the gate, which is there in memorial for those who have fallen in the First and Second World War from the town of Kirkintilloch. These memorials were bought by public subscription, most of them, in order to honour those who had gone to war in the First and the Second World War in particular. Some of them also have other conflicts like the Boer War, Falklands War, Korean War and so on. Particularly, I think down in Kilmarnock they've got a huge one that sits across from the Dick Institute. But this one here, it's that time of year where you can see poppies starting to arrive and people starting to commemorate the death of all the people who fought bravely in order to preserve our freedom. And by next week that should be filled with poppies and wreaths, and I can see a couple that have already arrived. So it's been a tough week, an interesting week and a tough week. It's been one where a lot of things have happened which have been likely to be life enhancing, I think, as time progresses. But the little bumps in the road are always good. Not as big bumps in the road, obviously, as this kind of panto season it is within any kind of fighting sport. We got the panto mimicry, I called it, of WWE with Tyson Fury, and anybody who was concerned that he was going to get hurt, very quickly that was dispelled as the whole made-up nature of WWE became obvious very, very quickly. It clearly earned him a great deal of money, and it also brought a lot of focus onto the sport of boxing, which is not a bad thing. When he announced that he wanted to go into MMA, that perhaps made a lot of eyebrows raised to the roof. Conor McGregor, having appeared in Russia, I think it was in a Moscow hotel, telling all his biggest rival where he was, knowing that his biggest rival wasn't in the country at the time, but his biggest rival's fans all came to pay a visit, which was nice. And Conor McGregor demonstrated that he had very good reflexes when a bottle, I think it was, came flying towards him. But pantomimicry, and part of that is the essence at times of how combat sports manage to get people to watch, and we're running towards what a lot of people in the boxing world don't like, which is the KSI Logan Paul fight at cruiserweight, where the two of them have turned professional, two YouTubers. And on that bill, out in America, what you also have is a WBO world title fight with Billy Joe Saunders, which has been attacked because it's that pantomime element. But these are YouTubers who have got millions of millions of followers, and are likely to bring a very, very different kind of fan into the sport and develop a new audience. So all of that has been going on in the kind of background, which has kind of been quite kind of bizarre, but it shows the strength that combat sports, boxing and MMA, to be fair to it, has. And Nate Diaz overnight went back in the octagon and came out it, and didn't come out it quite successfully. And it's interesting, I think, to see if that will mean that the Conor McGregor fight between the two of them is more or less likely. And the politics of MMA is not like the politics of boxing, as far as I can see. So that's going to be an interesting watch. So all of that in terms of boxing in particular. Last night, a nice card at Manchester, not quite as good as the last couple of weekends, but Martin Bakole getting somebody out in 2 rounds, fantastic for Billy Nelson down in Airdrie, a Congolese heavyweight based in Airdrie. I just love reading that in Sky Sport News and on the BBC. We also saw Felix Cash in a great fight with the boy Jack Cullen, managed to get him through and stop Cullen, just too strong for the guy. But in the first round there was an altercation where Cullen was gone, but then he came back and then it swung and it side to side, a real short fight of the year. I think it only got to 8 rounds, but great fight to watch. We also had Anthony Crolla in his farewell fight, won it on points. One of the scorecards was a draw, which was interesting. And Katie Taylor, who became a two-weight world champion. What a fantastic fight she brought to the table. I missed it, but I'm going to go back and watch Terry Harper against Vivian Obanoff. Obanoff had beat Natasha Jonas the last time out. A fantastic example of an unorthodox scrapper putting it on somebody in the professional ranks when she fought Jonas, and the professional Olympic boxer didn't know what to do and get beaten, get stopped. Whereas this time round, Terry Harper went in and really did a job. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. It's certainly that one of the good things is overnight there has not been a lot of scandals, because the other thing, the big fight was the Canelo Kovalev. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but I have to say that the 11th round is the one to watch. That is not a scandal by any stretch of the imagination, that Canelo went up 2 weights and beat Kovalev. Plenty of people had tipped him to do that, and that was because Kovalev is towards the end of his career. Scandals, however, have not been in boxing, not been in sport this week. They've been in further and higher education. 3 in particular. The first one is down south, where somebody who has been the head of a college, a further education college down south, is retiring after having been discovered that she had over £100,000 worth of expenses over something like 3 years, including something like £8,000 for clothing, and has decided to retire. Almost a sense like that same thing of the Grenfell fire chief, who after she has decided to retire, not because I think of the controversy that's come and the blame that has come to the fire brigades union. I'll come to that, but it's been long waited. But she's only 50, which is perhaps a measure of the responsibility that she carries and the effect that it has on her personally. We have also had a college principal suspended up in Scotland due to money, and also a scandal in another higher education institution, which is unusual insofar as it has hit the front page of the Stage. And this is about complaints from students about systemic bullying within the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. Now, I was in further education for 14 years, not because I could never get my qualification, but because I worked there. And during that time, there was a culture that grew in terms of working with students and engaging them, the co-creators of their education, it was called. And I remember being at an Education Scotland event and saying to one of the inspectors, I thought it was a ridiculous phrase to use, at which point he told me he had invented it, which didn't really go down well. And I think my career started on the slide from that point onwards, but I did think it was a ridiculous phrase. I think it was too clumsy. I think there were better phrases. I wasn't getting at the point of how engaging people involves them in their education, involves their learning, but there is a disparity of responsibility and a disparity of knowledge within that relationship, and therefore you need, I think, to reflect on how that works. And what happened in further education when students became increasingly involved in it was, if you as a lecturer wanted anything done, you had a tendency to go and get the student to ask for it, because you believed, rightly or wrongly, that the students were the ones who had the power. In this occasion, it would appear not so. That actually, due to alleged bad behaviour, and of course I've had a child at the Royal Conservatoire and a number of ex-students have gone through it. In drama, like sport, there are immediate parallels that can be drawn. Have a power imbalance more than many other types of subject matters, because your career is in a very small village and you can be labelled as a troublemaker, and you can find fault and difficulty wherever you go, and it follows you, and your name can be tarnished by somebody who's a little bit more powerful than you. So this is one that has to play out. My experience in further education was fantastic. I loved it until it changed, until I saw that what I had been working hard to create was going to be swiped aside, because in the amalgamation of colleges we were in the losing side, and I didn't want to end up being a bitter and twisted lecturer or educator or whatever. I wanted to get out with my own health intact more than anything else now. So many fantastic colleagues have been left who've struggled with that development, struggled with the way in which it has created almost super colleges with large numbers of senior and middle managers, which has not delivered the savings that people thought they were going to deliver. And that, I think, is a real challenge. And it's certainly a real challenge because in some further education colleges, what we've got at the moment is redundancies. And we're going back again in order to slim down. And the redundancies would appear finally, in a sense, to start to go from top to bottom in the college, not just at the bottom end where they think they can make easier savings. And it's going to be a difficult time, I think, for very many people. I also was out, Ringside Report this week, writing this week was interesting, week writing. My Air Advertiser column has gone. They've decided they don't want to use me anymore. There's a whole interesting kind of conversation in there where I'd written for them for a year and they hadn't noticed, and I hadn't been in the newspaper, and I didn't realise because I don't live in here, and I can't put my finger on when it stopped, but it's about editors moving on and not passing information. So knowing that I wasn't going to get used, I'd sent in an article, and surprisingly, I know we're covered with that, and they're putting in stuff which is basically just taking press releases and printing them. However, that kind of aside, I wrote about Scott Ledoux, the fighting freshman for Ringside Report, fantastic heavyweight boxer whose last fight was at Wembley Stadium against Frank Bruno. Didn't go beyond the third, but also he fought foreman Larry Holmes. His only world title fight was against Larry Holmes, and he didn't win that. He got draws against well-known names. Fought Weaver, fought Lyle. A real battler, died of Lou Gehrig's disease in 2011. And a great little story, another great little story. Love the American boxers and go and have a look and see what they are, because I didn't know who they were before. But I also this week, talking about great little things to go and see, so thank you very much, National Theatre of Scotland, Claire Cunningham, brilliant choreographer, fantastic dancer on crutches, who has brought together, I guess she's Austrian, English and New Zealander, in order to perform an hour and a half's worth of looking at Elvis impersonators. The four of them trained with Elvis impersonators, all four are disabled dance artists. And Claire, when she was a 16-year-old, a moody 16-year-old, saw a clip on telly of a young Elvis, and she had thought Elvis had been this kind of Las Vegas pastiche of himself, and was really surprised to see this really cool dude. And from that point on became fascinated not just by his voice, which she always loved, but also by his choreography and his dance and where he had stolen them from. And the performance, the hour and a half, the Cooper Institute in Glasgow, it's now moved on, I think, to the Manchester International Festival, who was a co-producer, was great, was a must-see, fantastic piece, and it transcended that idea of disability and ability into creativity, which was what made it stand out for me. And it brought again a conversation my son and I have had about the whole thing to do with disabled arts. And in Scotland, it would appear that the majority of money in terms of getting any kind of disabled, as in deaf audience, and let's say deaf audience, and is to put in interpreters rather than to employ deaf actors. I cannot think outside of one at the MacRobert Arts Centre in Stirling, and a couple for Solar Bear who were behind the deaf degree. I can't think of any theatre company in Scotland who have employed any of the graduates from the deaf degree, but I can think of several down south who have, and that to me is a real disgrace. But talking of disgrace and the Fire Brigades Union, I said I was going to mention it. The problem I have at the moment with I stand with the Fire Brigade Union posts that are coming up on Facebook is that ordinary firefighters absolutely demonstrated, as they have done many times before, their utter bravery at going into the fires that are started, that are begun, that devastate lives and communities and buildings. I don't think you can argue with that. The report is arguing with the management of the Fire Brigade. and how they believe that a decision that was taken, which is wrapped up with decisions taken within London, as evidenced by the mayor at the time knocking back any criticism of a reduction in resources, a reduction in finance, a reduction in firefighters within London. And it's unfortunate that that has become a battleground over the individuals. And I think that it is possibly right that the head of the fire brigade in London has looked at whether or not she feels she can continue. I would rather she had continued. I don't think it is something that is you can't recover from, both as an institution and also as an individual. And I think that it carries with it a taint rather than a defence. And I think that's very unfortunate, because what happened at Grenfell was a massive tragedy, huge tragedy. What happened at very many other places that we've seen over many, many years in the United Kingdom is a tragedy, like the Bradford fire. And I think we need to learn from it. And her testimony was unfortunate, where she said she would not do anything differently after the fire, which I think, given what we have seen in the evidence, suggests that people have died in vain. And next week, that's something that we are going to recognise, that people have not died in vain over the last 2 world wars and over any war that's happened and people have sacrificed for. So with that thought in mind, cheery though it might not be, it's bye for now.